Recently, I had the chance to sit down with some of my friends and hear how Jesus changed their lives. I always love hearing someone's testimony, and I thought you might also. The friends I've interviewed are all Jewish people whose lives were radically changed by Jesus. My husband thinks we should call this series Linked to Messiah. This week's testimony is with Larry Stamm. Larry runs a ministry that equips Christians to confidently share Jesus. He grew up in a Reformed Jewish home, attended synagogue, and at age 13 went through his bar mitzvah. He can recall people sharing Jesus with him in his college years, but he consistently rejected any conversation about Jesus and turned down invitations to church, to Bible studies, even Christian concerts. Put your earbuds in and hear how Jesus changed Larry's life forever. Hey there, my friends. Welcome to the Links to Messiah podcast, where we are passionate about teaching our children all about the connections between the Old and New Testament. I'm your host, Rachel Links Kushner, also known as the Chief Enthusiasm Officer of Links to Messiah. And I am so thrilled to have you join us today. Come along and discover how your family and children can grow in their faith as you discover the beautiful links that God reveals throughout Scripture about the history of His people and His Son Jesus, our Messiah. So today I'm very excited because we have my friend Larry Stamm with us today, in which he is a Jewish believer in Jesus. So today we get to hear his story of how he found Jesus. Welcome, Larry. I'm happy you're here.
Rachel, it's a blessing to be with you today.
Yes, and I just want to tell you something before I even do the intro. Your persistence with all the technology issues that we had in getting started is quite impressive because it took a long time. And so we know, as we discussed earlier before we hit record, we know that this is going to be a really powerful episode because I've never experienced so many tech issues. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what are you doing here? Or Satan, what are you doing? Because God has something really good with this.
I believe He does as well.
Yeah. So let me just do like a quick intro about what I know about Larry Stamm. I know you have Larry Stamm Ministries, which is your ministry. And I was looking on your website and it says, we exist to make the gospel of Jesus a confident topic of conversation for every Christian. I love that. And you offer ways to you have equipping resources that can help people as they witness. And I like that it says you witness with confidence and forms of connection that strengthen gospel foundations. That's an amazing.
Yeah, we are evangelism equippers, and we teach Jewish roots of the Christian faith, which we can talk about during our time, in order to build gospel foundations. Yes. You know, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, that the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, the New Testament, the Old Testament revealed. To better understand the person and work of Jesus, we have to study Tanakh, which is an acronym for the Old Testament. And that will help us better understand the person and work of Jesus, the Messiah, in the New. Remember in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus said, I have not come to abolish the law and the prophets. I've come to fulfill. So we teach Jewish roots of the Christian faith to help build gospel foundations. And I argue as an evangelism equipper that the better that we understand the gospel, the more effective we're going to be in sharing that gospel message with others. So there's a little bit of an overview of what we do as a ministry in various ways. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I think understanding the Jewish roots of our faith is critical to understanding the Bible as a whole, not two testaments, but one big giant redemption story. So I'm with you there. I agree. So let's just jump in. So tell us, just to give people a little bit of a background, where you're from. We know about your ministry. Tell us a little bit about your family, that kind of thing.
Well, I live in Jonesboro, Tennessee with my wonderful wife, Lori, and our kids, Elijah and Shoshana. I'm actually the son of a Holocaust.
How old are the kids now?
Elijah is 22. Shoshana is 20. Yeah, they're young adults. Yeah.
Yes, they are. But wait, okay, and then I interrupted you. I apologize. You said you are the son of a Holocaust survivor?
Yeah, my father escaped Bonn, Germany in 1939. Actually, it was a gentleman who served in World War I, Rachel, with my grandpa Carl. He was close friends with my father's family. This man actually would become an SS agent in the 1930s. He falsified papers, enabling my father and his family to escape Nazi Germany in the spring of 1939. Your listeners may remember Kristallnacht, November 1938. It was getting hot and heavy over there. A lot of persecution against our Jewish people. They made their way to British Honduras, today known as Belize, and about a year later in 1940, they immigrated to Daytona Beach, Florida. And I grew up in Florida.
Okay.
I was born in Daytona, raised in St. Pete. Our family, Reformed Jews. We were liberal. Culturally and socially, we were very connected to the Jewish community, but spiritually and religiously not so connected to God, although I received a religious education. I was bar mitzvah at 13. I always believed in God. I believed that He knew me and I was special in His eyes. But in high school, I turned my back on my religion per se, but I never stopped believing in God. There's a God-shaped void in each human life we know that only can be filled by Messiah Jesus. You know, He wants people to receive Him. He wants people to know Him. God created human beings to know Him and to make Him known. I tried to fill that void in my life in high school with accomplishment and achievement. I was a state-ranked tennis player in Florida. I was a good student in college, at the party scene, at the University of Florida. I thought worldly pleasure would fill that void. It didn't. But in college, people started sharing their faith in Jesus with me, coming up to me and telling me that Jesus is the promised Messiah, that He died for my sins and rose again from the dead. And
you're like, what are you talking about?
See, I'm like, Jesus? Jesus and Jewish did not go together for us. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I just want to go back to one thing that you said. You said you turned your back on God. So
I turned my back.
Can we just dive into that for a second?
Yeah. I never stopped believing in God. I stopped following my Judaism because it didn't feed my soul and it didn't meet the deepest of my soul. So I never stopped believing in God. And at some point, there was a disconnect between a relationship with God or knowing about God and my Judaism, sadly enough. That was the reality. And again, when people started challenging me at the end of my faith journey, in college, I had a friend tell me, he said, you know, you're Jew. He would tell me, you know, do you know who you are? Do you know where you're going when you die? I was like, I have no idea how to answer that. I began searching in college. I didn't necessarily.
Yeah, that's a big question.
The biggest question. I did. You know, do you know who you are? Do you know where you're going when you die? That is the question of questions for people. Who are we? What's our identity? Where are we going? What's our destiny? I started searching, Rachel, and I didn't necessarily embrace my Judaism or Christianity. I started to examine and explore different worldviews, philosophies, and religions. Fast forward on my journey.
Oh, did you? Okay.
The year after I graduated from the University of Florida, and I was on an airplane, and a guy sat next to me all wide-eyed. I was reading a philosophy book, and he looked over and he said, "A philosophy book? I've got a master's degree in philosophy. Let's talk." And you might find this hard to believe. He actually did most of the talking. He shared his faith in Jesus. He said two things. He says, you tell me you're Jewish and you believe in God? I said, yeah. He said, I challenge you, ask your God, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if Jesus is the promised Messiah, and He'll show you the truth. And I was 23 years old.
He challenged you to do that.
And as a missionary to my Jewish people in New York City in the 2000s, I have often asked that question of my Jewish people. Do you believe in the God of Israel? Yes. Why don't you ask our God, the God who is Yahweh, if Yeshua, Jesus, is the promised Messiah, if you have the faith and courage to do so? Well, I was 23 years old going nowhere fast, and I got off the airplane that day, and I prayed a deep theological prayer. I said, God, help. I said, I don't know about Jesus, Messiah, the Bible, the Christianity, but I believe you're real. Show me. 3 months later, I called this guy up on the telephone. He'd given me his business card. He was a traveling insurance salesman from Kentucky.
Oh, the guy from the airplane?
I was living in Florida, and I called him up, and I said, Steve, I believe, what do we do? What happens now? He said, slow down, man. You're talking way too fast. And I prayed to receive Jesus, as my Lord and my Savior, my Messiah. And that's 36 plus years.
Like on that phone call?
On that phone call, yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So are you still in touch with this gentleman?
I called him years later when I was serving as a missionary to my Jewish people in New York City. And he vaguely remembered me. But he was really happy, but he vaguely remembered me. He was still a
vaguely.
I had his business card. He was a MetLife insurance salesman from Owensboro, Kentucky. And it was years later. You know, I got saved in 1987. This is in the mid 2000s. So this was like 20 plus years. He was thrilled that I'd become a missionary.
Right.
Walking with the Lord.
Is your family racing from one activity to the next activity? Are you stressed out because your to-do list never feels completed? Maybe you just need to rest. Shabbat is the Hebrew word for rest or Sabbath. We are commanded to keep the Sabbath holy. But what does that look like? We've created a fun-filled activity box to help you do just that. Besides having games, activities, stickers, and an awesome playlist of music, the Shabbat box will help your family come together to create lifelong memories. The goal of the Shabbat box is to come alongside of your family and generate some exciting and meaningful habits around rest. Curious to know more? Check it out at linkstomessiah.com or click the link in the show notes.
I just got to say something like, I think that is so powerful for people to hear that you had a conversation with a guy on an airplane years and years ago and how pivotal that was for you. And that question that he asked you is very powerful. I think it's a great encouragement for those of us, who are consistently witnessing and we want to see people come to Christ, and to just be so open in a conversation on an airplane about philosophy. And God placed that man right next to you with deep purpose.
For such a time as this, and your listeners should know that it was not only God using Steve on the airplane, it was God using my friend Greg in college at university. It was a gentleman that I had an internship with one summer trying to learn how to sell television time. I was a journalism major at the University of Florida. And I came to faith in Jesus not through going to church or watching or listening to a Billy Graham or Greg Laurie. I didn't go to a Bible study. I didn't go online. There was no online back in the 80s, young people. It was through the faith and testimony of people in the marketplace. I define the marketplace as anywhere outside the walls of a church building or a congregation building. This is the marketplace. And that's why I have such a burden to help God's people share the gospel effectively wherever they are, because each of us has a unique sphere of influence and platform. And you will meet people and know people that I will never meet. And the same is true for each one watching or listening to this podcast.
Right. Yes. Okay. I have a question. I'm very curious how your Jewish family responded when you told them that you believe Jesus to be the Messiah.
It was truly a mixed bag. I had grandmother, my maternal grandmother, say, "How can you do this? No one in our family has ever believed in Jesus before." Another family member said, "Go with God." My mother said, "We need to get you a shrink. You're just going, you need some counseling."
Really?
I know the wonderful counselor. This is not a phase. But it was really a mixed bag. Jewish both sides. I was a closet Christian for 18 months. That's how long it took me to come out, so to speak. Because like I said, I'm the first believer.
Really?
And it was very, very difficult. Very difficult. I was not attending a church because I came to faith through people who were not in my local town. remember, I meet a guy on an airplane. I had a Christian friend of mine who's now living in Jacksonville, me living in St. Pete, Florida. So it was kind of flying solo. I was Christian radio, and I had the Bible, and I wasn't going to church. When I first came to faith in Jesus, I thought, as a Jewish person, I'm the only Jew in the world who believes this. And then once I had the courage to tell my mom, she said, well, go to church with Myrna. This was a friend of ours, a Jewish woman who was going to a Presbyterian church. And all those years growing up, she was a longtime friend of my mom's, a friend.
Really?
I had no idea this woman was a Christian. And I started going to church with her and her husband.
Wow.
I started going to church.
Did you?
And it was a game changer to be around other people of like mind. And then Myrna in 1989 gave me a newsletter from an organization called Jews for Jesus, the preeminent mission in the world preaching the gospel to Jewish people, as you well know. And that changed everything. I realized I wasn't alone, that in fact, God is moving and saving more and more mishpacha, we would say family in Hebrew. Jewish people are coming to faith in numbers. We know this. So it was very encouraging to me to know that. In fact, I got so excited about that reality that I did 2 mission stints with the ministry myself, and had an opportunity to lead my Jewish people to Jesus. God used me to bring people to himself and saw Jewish people come to faith, be a light and to sow gospel seed into many Jewish people's lives. It's a beautiful thing. So, I'm privileged to know the Lord. It is. So eternally grateful for all he's done in my life.
Yeah. I love that you said you were like a closeted Christian for 18 months, and then you stepped into a Presbyterian church and like a whole new world opened up to you. Like you said, you thought you were the only Jewish person on the whole planet that believed Yeshua is our Messiah. And then you walk in there and you meet this lady who you've known your whole life.
All these years.
Wow. Did your mom knew she was going to a Presbyterian church. Did your mom have any understanding of the implications of what that meant?
Possibly. My mom had remarried a Gentile man who was a professing Christian. So they had an agreement that they would not make an issue in their marriage. And it wasn't an issue until Larry comes along one afternoon and goes, I become a Christian now. And then it became forefront in the dynamic of my family with my stepfather, Jack, a wonderful man who on his deathbed had told my mom, Sari, I'm going to heaven and I want you to be there. Can you imagine? He said, I was reading Psalms.
Oh, I have goosebumps.
Yeah, it's intense. So touch points with God. So a lot of good stuff there. A lot of seeds sown over the years. My family has heard the gospel.
Yeah.
My family's read some of my Christian books. I've by God's grace, penned 3 Christian books.
Okay.
Bible books, gospel-oriented books. People can check them out at our website at larrystamm.org. And my mom getting a chance.
I was just about to ask you, where do we buy those books?
At our website at larrystamm.org. I have written 3 books. The first book, Serving in His Court, is about personal evangelism. We published that 10 years ago. Our second book, Into the Gale, 12 evangelistic lessons from the book of Acts, deals with how to live victoriously amidst increasing persecution. That book is written for the American believer in the American church. And
that's relevant.
Yeah, relevant. It's a now book. And then in 2021, we published Jewish Roots of Christianity, a biblical survey of redemptive history from Genesis to Revelation, which is a 200-page Bible study about Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah. And in that book, we connect the dots between the Hebrew scriptures and the Brit Chadashah we know better as the New Covenant or New Testament. So it's a powerful Bible study. And
so that book is pretty much, if I'm understanding correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that third book that you just mentioned pretty much takes prophecy from Old Testament and shows you how it's fulfilled in the New Testament.
Exactly. The whole book is prophetic in nature in that way, connecting the dots. Remember, Yeshua said in Matthew 5, the first time he spoke in public, I have not come to abolish the law and the prophets, I've come to fulfill. So when we are studying Jesus, our Messiah, Lord, we need to understand what it was and as he came to fulfill in order to better understand his ministry on earth when he came the first time and his ministry on earth when he returns again to sit on the throne of David in Jerusalem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Larry, I will be sure to put in the show notes your website so that people can just click on that and see all that you offer and hopefully purchase one, if not all three of those books. For those who are not going to click on that link, I just want to let people know LarryStamm.org, but Stamm is with two M's as in Mary, S-T-A-M-M.
S-T-A-M-M, like M&M's. Yeah, that's true. Two M's.
Oh, M&M's. I like that better. That's cute. Yeah. That's a much better way to remember it. That's a more fun mnemonic device.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Well, great. This has been amazing. I am so blessed to hear your story because even though I've known you for years, I didn't know this about you. I didn't know that there was this guy on the plane and that your mom had a dear friend who was a believer who introduced you to a whole new group of people who believe the same way.
Yeah.
And wow, how God has touched your life and you went full 180.
Yeah, and then some. By God's grace, again, eternally grateful to the Lord, and so happy to talk with you.
Yes.
You know, my Jewish sister.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. Well,
thank you.
My Jewish brother, yes. Yeah. And big thanks to your wife for helping us with all the tech issues.
Yes, thank God for her.
I appreciate you, Larry. Yeah, thank you for your time and thanks for sharing your story. And I'm excited for people to go to your website, learn more about you, and dig in more of what you're doing and how God just changed everything and directed you. Another time, I would like to hear how and why you started Larry Stamm Ministries. But we'll save that for our next conversation because I would love to dig into that too. Because I know there's a good story there.
Yeah, there is a story there.
Okay. That'll be our next podcast.
Okay.
I bet.
Good.
Well, thank you, Larry. Appreciate you so much.
Rachel, thank you so much. It's been a joy. Didn't I tell you it was going to be worth it? We kept plugging away and eventually got open the door. We just needed to go to Lori, pray, and then go see Lori. Yeah,
that's right.
Thank you for being a part of the Links to Messiah podcast family. Your support means the world to us, and your feedback and engagement keep us going strong. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends and family. Let's continue growing this incredible community together. Until next week, keep reading the Bible to your children, keep their curiosity burning, and keep coming back for more tips to anchor your child's faith to Jesus, our Messiah. This is your host, Rachel Links Kushner, signing off with a big smile and a heart full of gratitude.